And then everybody, please welcome Jennifer Knutson with the University of Minnesota Extension Program out of Crow Wing County.
Well, hello everybody. It's a it's a great day to learn about poisonous plants. It's finally raining up here in Nisswa. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the evil plants that we may encounter, and there are many common plants that are found in our house or outdoors in our garden, woods, fields, which can cause problems if they're eaten or handled. So it's really beneficial to know both the botanical and the common names of these plants. Each year, over 100,000 people call poison control centers about plant and mushroom exposures. I'm only going to be talking about plants. Mushrooms are a whole presentation onto themselves. So some people may develop an allergic reaction to plants that are harmless to most other people. We know some people who are allergic to peanuts, and they go into shock. So the effects of poisonous plants are anywhere from an allergic reaction to a skin irritation, and in rare occasions, well, illness is not so rare, but death is rare. But the effects of the poisonous plants range from all those from allergic reaction all the way to death. And what happens depends on the inherent toxicity of the plant, what parts are contacted, because some parts are more poisonous than others. Some parts are not even poisonous while others are. The time of the year, sometimes plants are more poisonous at the beginning of the summer and sometimes more at the end. The stage of growth, there are quite a few plants where the younger the plant, it's more dangerous, and vice versa. And then, of course, the amount of material with which the person has come into contact will make a difference. Age, weight, and sensitivity of the person makes a difference. Most often, it's children, because of their low weight, that are more affected by poisonous plants. So what do these plants have in common? I'm sure you all recognize them. These are all plants that many of you probably have in your home gardens. Well, these plants make a lethal bouquet. So all parts of Convallaria, which is your lily of the valley, are poisonous. Your foxglove, the digitalis, poisonous. Buttercup has a very irritating juice that can severely injure the digestive system if you were to eat one. And your bleeding hearts are poisonous. So in 1856, in the Scottish village of Dingwall, a servant was sent outside to dig up horseradish, but instead he uprooted aconite. The cook, failing to recognize that she had been handed the wrong ingredient, grated it into a sauce for the roast and promptly killed 2 priests who were guests for dinner. Other guests were sickened but survived. Even today, aconite, which is in the genus Aconitum, is easily mistaken for an edible herb. And this is a perennial that is found in many gardens and in the wild throughout the United States. So here's horseradish on the left. And just as an aside, the leaves of horseradish are toxic. And here's a picture of what the root looks like. And then on the right is aconitum and what the aconitum root looks like. And so they're very similar, but all parts of aconitum are extremely lethal. And backpackers shouldn't be tempted by this white carrot-shaped root. And in fact, Canadian actor Andre Noble died of aconite poisoning after he encountered it on a hiking trip in 2004. So here's Aconitum napellus. This is in my garden. It's a very popular garden plant, but it's one of the most poisonous plants in the garden. It has such a distinctive and unpleasant taste, however, that a case of accidental poisoning would be rare, but it's not unknown. And sometimes, as we know, young children or pets will often chew or eat anything, no matter how it tastes. So this cultivar is Orenzii, and again, it's in my garden. And ironically, Friday night, my husband and I were watching a British mystery, and the detective was trying to figure out how this person died of a supposed heart attack. And she kept focusing on this man's the alleged killer's garden. And I said to my husband, I'll bet you anything it's aconitum poisoning. I bet you he used the juice of aconitum to kill to kill the man. And sure enough, as it turned out, it was aconitum poisoning. He'd used his plant in his garden, the juice from it, from the root, to kill someone. So deadly aconite has a alkaloid that is called aconitine, and that's what's poisonous. And so, because I'll use the word alkaloid throughout the presentation, what alkaloids are, they are an organic compound that in many cases has some kind of a pharmacological effect on humans or animals. Aconitine is so powerful that Nazi scientists used it as an ingredient for poisoned bullets, and Native Americans used the juice from aconitum root as a poison on tips of arrows. And again, the mystery I watched the other night, that's how the person got murdered, with aconite. Here are two other beautiful garden plants to be careful of. Dicentra, which is our lovely old-fashioned bleeding heart, contains a toxic alkaloid that could cause nausea, seizures. Delphinium is in the same family as aconitum. Delphinium is often used as a vertical accent plant in a sunny garden, and aconitum, which is monkshood, is often found in a shade garden. They look similar, and then one is really good for a sunny garden and one's good for a shady garden. But the delphinium also contains aconitum poisoning, or the aconitine, and the amounts of toxins vary according to the species, the age of plant, but a lethal dose would not be out of the question. Lathyrus, your sweet pea, this resembles a normal pea vine, except the flowers are larger, they're more colorful, they're very fragrant. And by the way, an annual sweet pea is much more fragrant than the perennial sweet pea. But sweet pea is one of a number of pea and vetch plants, and it's in the genus Lathyrus, and that can bring on lathyrism, which is a paralysis, weakness, tremors. Here are two more poisonous beauties. Rhododendron, and azalea is a rhododendron. So the one thing to be careful about with rhododendrons is that they have a toxin in it called gryanatoxin, which is in the leaves, the flowers, the nectar, the pollen. The leaves are the most toxic, and they're toxic to cats and dogs. So gryanatoxin can be found in honey made from the nectar, and the affected honey is known as mad honey and causes mad honey disease in humans. This is virtually unheard of in the United States, but it is more common when honey originates from the Black Sea region, because they have the rhododendrons grow prolifically there. And so bees do use the pollen to make honey in the Black Sea region. This is something to be aware of, though, because if you're a beekeeper or you have honey, beehives, it's important not to be having your beehives in among azaleas or rhododendrons. Hydrangeas, they have low levels of cyanide in them. Poisonings are rare, but the one thing to be aware of with a hydrangea flower is that oftentimes they're used as a wedding cake topper or a cake topper, and that could lead someone to believe that they're edible, and they're not. They have low levels of cyanide in them. The taxus, or your yew, every part of the yew is highly poisonous, and it has an alkaloid in it called taxine. All parts of the tree, except the arils, and that's an aril up in the right corner. All parts of the tree except the arils contain taxine, and the arils are edible and tempting for children, but the seed inside it is dangerously, dangerously poisonous. So if the berry is swallowed whole, it would pass right through the body without being digested. But if it was chewed, it would have fatal results in a very short time. 3 berries would kill a person. So grazing animals are sometimes found dead near yew trees after eating the leaves. But deer are able to break down the poisons, and as we know, if you have yews in your yard, the deer will eat them freely. For some reason, it doesn't affect deer. And just as an interesting tidbit, Taxol, which is extracted from yew, is used to treat ovarian and lung cancer. So there are quite a few bulbs that are poisonous. And the one thing to be careful is the scent of bulb fertilizers. A lot of times when we plant bulbs, we put in bone meal, and that attracts dogs. And so a dog could dig up the bulb and chew on a few bulbs before realizing their terrible mistake. Daffodils and tulip bulbs contain a variety of toxins. Tulips produce a highly irritating sap that is hazardous to horticulturist workers, and it causes a rash called tulip fingers. The tulip bulb looks like an onion, and it has been unintentionally eaten because of the similarity. And one interesting thing is during World War II, people in Holland were starving to death. The Nazis had taken, all the good food, and some people had resorted to boiling tulip bulbs. And as they discovered that if they ate less than 5 tulip bulbs a day, then they only had some mild GI effects. But in higher doses and not boiled, they can cause severe gastrointestinal problems. So
Jennifer,
plants that, yes?
I do have one question. If the
Uh-huh.
bulbs are so toxic, why don't they get rid of our little buddies, the Rockies of the world? You know who I'm talking about, squirrels.
I know, it's amazing because daffodils are very toxic, daffodil bulbs, and I can't successfully grow them here because of the squirrels. The squirrels dig them up. They don't eat them, but they dig them up. And then, of
Hmm.
course, they're laying there bare on the ground and then won't grow. But yeah, it just amazes me. I keep trying to plant daffodils and they don't come up because they've been dug up by squirrels. It's really frustrating. In fact, I grow tulips, but I do it in a raised bed cutting garden so that the critters can't get to the bulbs or the tulips.
Okay. Sorry,
So plants that
I just couldn't believe that if they're that toxic, our friends Rocky won't keel over when they eat them.
I know. Well, it's the same with monkshood, the aconitum. I was giving a presentation one time on shade gardening, and I said the deer will not eat aconitum because they're so highly toxic. And lo and behold, I came home that day from the presentation, and the deer had eaten the flowers of my aconitum. And I was looking around in my woods trying to find a dead deer, and I didn't, unfortunately, find one. But yeah, for some reason, some animals, it either doesn't affect them, or in the case of the squirrels, they dig them up and they don't eat them, but they've ruined them for you.
Yep.
So plants that are in the Iridaceae family, iris, scilla, hyacinth, gladiolas are also in this family. They can cause tissue irritation when they're eaten or handled. The irritating compound is in a higher concentration in the bulb. So it's unlikely that they would be ingested, but if they were, it would cause vomiting and diarrhea. The Scilla sibirica contains a cardiac glycoside, which can cause poisoning if ingested. Hyacinth is very well known in the flower industry for causing hyacinth itch if the bulbs are handled with bare hands. And, I live up in zone 3 in Nisswa, and so hyacinth are not hardy up here. But many of us have those hyacinth vases where we force the bulbs for some winter color. So if you're going to force bulbs, make sure that you wear gloves because it can cause hyacinth itch. Um, Autumn crocus, the colchicum, is very toxic. The bulbs and the flowers are toxic. And the reason why it's important to know this is that sometimes it's mistaken for wild garlic. So I put a picture of Canadian wild garlic, which you will find here in Minnesota, and you can see the flowers are similar, and you can see the bulbs are similar. So in 2003, a 76-year-old man with a history of alcoholism ate the plant because he mistook it for wild garlic, and he suffered renal and liver failure and died. So in Europe, 2 people were poisoned by eating autumn crocus instead of wild garlic. One died of heart and kidney failure, and the other recovered, but after 3 days of severe gastrointestinal upset. So, this can be a concern for people who go hiking. Um, Morning glory is kind of interesting. It's a fast-growing annual vine. It has beautiful flowers. The birds, bees, and butterflies love it, but the seeds can be poisonous, especially in large quantities. The seeds of morning glory contain a chemical that's very similar to LSD. So eating enough of them can cause many types of symptoms. And for a while, the seeds were very popular with teenagers who were heading to the garden center to get a cheap high from morning glory seeds. And they would make a tea with it. Well, some garden center owners were very unaware of this trend, and they were selling seed packets to teenagers, hoping that young people were starting to show an interest in gardening, but they had other interests. So, which houseplant is not toxic? I wish that I could have people raise their hand.
Yeah.
some, some of the most popular houseplants are surprisingly toxic, and it's the poinsettia that's not toxic.
What?
Yeah, I know. Every time I give this presentation, everybody's hands go up. It's the poinsettia that's toxic, but it's not. Um, the poinsettia is in the Euphorbiaceae family, and any plant that's in that family, or most of the plants in that family, have a white sap in it that's mildly irritating, but that's the extent of it. And in fact, when my daughter was 1, well, she was barely walking. She was in one of those little round things that toddler or little babies are in, where it has wheels, and she scooted over to the hearth of our fireplace and pulled a flower off the poinsettia, a bract, and stuck it in her mouth. And being a new mother, I went hysterical, called poison control. And they said, oh, it just has an irritating sap. Wash out her mouth, she'll be fine. So many of us believe that the poinsettia is poisonous. It's not. But the spathiphyllum, your peace lily in the middle, that gets more calls to the poison control center than any other house plant. And Dieffenbachia on the right, I'll talk a little bit about, it's poisonous too.
We
So
do
here
have,
is your,
Jennifer.
hmm?
We do have one question about the poinsettia. Is it
Uh-huh.
toxic to animals,
No,
specifically dogs and cats?
it just has an irritating sap in it. If you break open a stem or a leaf, you'll see kind of a milky substance in it, and it's just irritating. So it won't poison an animal or a human.
Oh, it's good to know. Okay.
But a peace lily, on the other hand, will. It has calcium oxalate crystals in it, and that can bring on skin irritations. If one were to put a leaf in your mouth, it would cause burning of the mouth, difficulty swallowing it if you accidentally swallowed it. And the English ivy also gets berries sometimes, and of course they're bitter enough that that would discourage anybody from trying to eat one. But again, children, you just never know what they might do, and one could pick off a berry or pull off a leaf and put it in their mouth. So the sap from the leaves of the ivy also causes serious skin irritations and blisters. Philodendron, it's native to South America, and all parts of the plant contain calcium oxalates. So nibbling on a leaf would just bring some mild burning in the mouth or a little nausea, but ingesting it would lead to severe abdominal pain. The US Poison Control Centers received over 1,600 calls in 2006 that were related to philodendron poisoning. So it happens. Dieffenbachia is another South American tropical plant, and it's very well known for its ability to temporarily inflame vocal cords, leaving people unable to speak. So if you have somebody at your house that won't shut up, give them I'm just teasing. Don't give them a leaf of Dieffenbachia. I'm teasing. Don't tell the university I said that, please. These two indoor trees, the ficus, are closely related members of the mulberry family. And the latex from these plants can cause severe allergic reactions. And in fact, in one case history, there was a woman who developed anaphylactic shock and other symptoms that disappeared when her ficus tree was finally removed from her house. The pencil cactus, many people have this as a house plant. This is an African plant that really is not a cactus. It resembles a succulent, and it's in the euphorbia family, so it produces that corrosive sap that causes severe rashes and eye irritation. You should wear gloves when pruning it. And 2 years ago, one of my friends moved from one condo to another condo. She had her handyman prune it down because it was too big to move, and he was in the hospital a few hours later. He didn't prune it with gloves. He didn't know that it was dangerous. Neither did she. He unfortunately got the sap on his hands and rubbed his eyes and ended up in the emergency room a few hours later. So wear gloves if you're going to prune yours. And then the Jerusalem cherry, I mean, we often find this in a grocery store in the florist section, and it's an ornamental pepper plant that's pretty, but it's more closely related to deadly nightshade. And all parts of that plant have an alkaloid that can bring on weakness and nausea and all kinds of problems. And of course, they would look tempting to a child to grab one of those off the plant. So a few plant families seem to have more than their fair share of black sheep. And plants in a family are genetically related, so they do have similar characteristics. You've heard me talking about the euphorbias. So I'm going to talk about 5 different botanical crime families. The nightshade family is the Solanaceae family, and nightshades represent some of the best and worst plants humans have ever encountered. Datura is one of them. I don't know how many of you have planted this either in your garden, or many of us will put it in a container for a container gardening. Buy it at the nursery in the beginning of the summer. They're gorgeous flowers, they're fragrant, but it's a member of the deadly nightshade family. And all parts of this plant contain alkaloids that cause hallucinations and seizures. And the alkaloids are especially concentrated in the seeds. So teenagers and adults acting like teenagers have made a tea of leaves in search of a cheap high, but drinking that tea could be a deadly mistake. So 2 other plants that look a lot like datura or angel's trumpet are brugmansia and moonflower. And both of those are also poisonous. They're all very similar. Atropa belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. The entire plant is poisonous. Rubbing up against it can raise pustules on the skin. Again, it has gorgeous dusky purple flowers, and they're often sold in nurseries for container planting or to put in the garden. But do not put this in your garden if you have any young children who visit you, because those ripe black berries are just too tempting, and they are extremely, extremely toxic. And the toxic is an alkaloid called atropine. So small doses of this plant material in humans produces delirium, hallucinations. 2 berries can kill a child. 10 berries are lethal to an adult. And dogs and cats are susceptible to this poison also. Many birds, all birds actually can eat them just fine, and other animals can eat them too with no ill effects. But they are very toxic to humans, dogs, cats. Now, a couple earned their place in medical history when they made a pie with these berries because they mistook them for edible bilberries, which look similar. Solanum dulcamara is the bittersweet nightshade, and it's commonly found in Minnesota yards, fields, woodland edges, vacant lots, shorelines. It's usually found in partly shady areas, not sunny areas, and you can see on the map the counties in which you find bittersweet nightshade. It's a perennial woody vine, and it has little star-shaped purple flowers and green berries that turn red when ripe. And they have some common names: climbing nightshade, deadly nightshade, woody nightshade. And here's what the flowers and the berries look like up close. So the plant is not as deadly as one of its common names suggests, such as deadly nightshade, but the berries can make you very sick if eaten in any quantity. So the berries are about 1/4 of an inch long, and as you can see, they're egg-shaped. They ripen to a shiny red, and the mildly poisonous toxic substance in it is called solanine, and it's most concentrated in the unripe berries. Cases of illness resulting from eating its green berries have been reported, and of course, the greatest potential danger is for small children because they have a lower body weight. So Solanaceae is the nightshade family. And so knowing what family a plant belongs to can also be useful in making decisions about rotating our plants in our vegetable gardens and for managing pests and soil fertility in the garden. So members of the Solanaceae family, like potatoes, peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, you would never want to plant strawberries, which are a member of the Rosaceae family, after having a member of the Solanaceae family in that spot, and vice versa, because they are all very susceptible to the disease verticulum wilt. So it's important not to keep planting your tomatoes and Solanaceae family vegetables in the same spot year after year. And I plant my tomatoes in pots instead of in my garden because with tomatoes, you have to be so careful that they are watered consistently so I can take better care of them if they're in pots by my house rather than up in my garden. But I never plant them in the same pot 2 years in a row. I switch pots. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is about rotating your crops. Well, imagine a pepper so hot that popping one in your mouth could send you to a hospital. As you can see at the bottom of the scale, the bell pepper is a 0 on the Schofield heat units. The Schofield heat units measure heat intensity in chili peppers. So you can see that they go all the way from 0 up to 2,200,000 heat units. So the jalapeno pepper used to be what we considered to be the hottest pepper any sane person would try to chew and swallow. But there, as you can see, it's 4th from the bottom. Look at how many hotter ones there are. I know that my son, when he was in high school, had a fascination with growing habanero peppers. And I had a friend who just contacted me and said her son, who just graduated from college, wanted to plant some hot peppers and wanted to know what the hottest pepper was. I said the Carolina Reaper. So these are, what makes them hot is capsaicin. The capsaicin in them, it causes the heat, and it doesn't burn. It stimulates the nerve endings to send a signal to the brain that mimics a burning sensation. Now, capsaicin doesn't dissolve in water. So if you eat a hot pepper, don't go grab a glass of water or ice water, because that will not put out the fire in your mouth. However, capsaicin will bind to a milk product. So you could grab milk, cheese, sour cream, and even better, you could run to your liquor cabinet, because vodka, gin, alcohol will put out the heat. Also, beer, by the way, doesn't have a high enough alcohol content, so don't grab a beer, grab the vodka or gin. The Anacardiaceae family is the cashew family. And Members of this family tend to bear a fruit that's called a drupe. So your mango, your cashew, the pistachio, those all have drupes. But members of the cashew family produce a toxic resin that brings on painful and long-lasting rashes, and you probably recognize a plant or two in there. Poison ivy, oak, and sumac are probably the most feared plants in this family. And just as an aside, there is absolutely no poison oak in the state of Minnesota. But there is poison ivy and sumac, and I'll talk about it. Do not light a member of the cashew family on fire. It produces a noxious smoke that burns the lungs. And just last week, my husband was digging out, he had very thick gloves on, and he was pulling some poison ivy out. And he said, I'm going to throw it on the burning pit. And I screamed, no, don't throw it on the burning pit. It emits the smoke. It'll burn lungs. It's noxious. Don't do it. So you have to be very careful that you never throw poison ivy on a burning pit and burn it. So here is poison ivy. It's pretty amazing because, a lot of even master gardeners have a very difficult time identifying poison ivy. And my husband and I watched a YouTube video over and over about 4 or 5 times to identify it properly, because we have poison ivy, quite a bit of poison ivy on our property. But it is a native species. It's distinguished by its leaves that are divided into 3 leaflets. And you probably know the old saying, leaves of 3, let it be. But the thing that makes it hard to identify is there's lots of variation in leaf size, shape, shade of green. I had a master gardener tell me the other day, oh, well, they have shiny leaves. That's how you identify them. Well, on the left, you see, yes, those are shiny leaves, but I took the picture on the right just a few days ago as I was walking down my driveway, and those are not shiny leaves, and that's poison ivy. So there's quite a variation in size of the leaves, the shape of the leaves, the shade of green, whether they're shiny, dull. But the toxic compound in poison ivy is urushiol. And this can cause severe blisters, rashes, swelling on the skin. I'm sure all of you have encountered poison ivy, or many of you have. Interestingly, 85% of the population is allergic to urushiol, and that's according to the American Academy of Dermatology. So it can be spread easily through contact with the plant oil, found on freshly contaminated clothing, gloves, footwear, pet hair. If your dog or cat is allowed outside, but if they get into poison ivy, it will spread to you if you touch it, if you touch the oil on the hair. If you have it on your clothing, your gloves, and then you pull your gloves off and you have the oil on your gloves, you've just gotten poison ivy rash. So, and again, please don't burn it. Has a very, very dangerous smoke that can cause severe respiratory problems. Here's poison sumac. And as you can see by the map, it's not commonly found in Minnesota. And poison sumac gives a bad rap to all the other native sumacs. And so some people avoid sumacs in fear of it being poison sumac. But it is much more poisonous than poison ivy, but it is restricted to swamps and other wet places, and you can see that it's only in east central counties of Minnesota. So it's very likely that you will not encounter it, and it's highly unlikely the average day hiker would encounter it. But it is easily distinguished. You can see that it has kind of that creamy colored berries, whereas your good sumac, your not evil sumac, has red berries. And I wanted to just talk about cashews, since we're talking about the cashew family. There's a reason why grocery stores don't sell raw cashew nuts. We go to the grocery store and we think we're buying raw cashew nuts, but we're not. In a little league team in Pennsylvania sold bags of cashew nuts, and half of the people that ate them developed rashes on their arms, groins, armpits, because some of the bags contain pieces of the shell, which would have the exact same effect as mixing poison ivy leaves with the nuts. So the reason why grocery stores don't sell it is because, like poison ivy and poison sumac, the cashew tree produces urushiol. So the nut itself, of course, is perfectly safe to eat. But if it comes in contact with any little part of the shell during harvest, it will give the person who eats it a nasty rash. So cashews are steamed open, making them partially cooked, even if they appear to be raw. So they are never sold raw here in the US. Well, except these poor people in Pennsylvania who have got some shell in theirs. So the Urticaceae family is your nettle family, and these small and often harmless looking plants are best known for their anatomical feature, the urticating hairs. And those fine hairs may look innocent, but they contain minute doses of poison that's released when those hairs get under our skin. And so here's what it looks like. I'm sure you're all very familiar with nettle. In Minnesota, nettle is found in many places: prairies, landscape plantings, woodland edges. In Minnesota, it is an invasive weed that spreads very rapidly. And as you can see, it's light green, and see the little urticating hairs on the stems? Well, those sting your skin when touched. So make sure that if you're going to pull them up, you wear protective clothing when you hand pull them. The spurge family is the Euphorbiaceae family. And it, again, I've mentioned before, it has a highly irritating milky sap that's produced by most members of the spurge family. There are a few exceptions. So any plants that produce a milky sap should be handled with care, because it could burn the skin and eyes, like I told you about the pencil cactus. And he ended up in an emergency room by rubbing his eyes. So gardeners may recognize the more common euphorbias that we buy as annuals. You can see on the right, many of us have diamond frost euphorbia in our pots because it's a beautiful filler plant. And castor bean, just 2 weeks ago, I had a friend text me and sent me a picture of a castor bean plant. And he said, I bought this at the college plant sale, and I'm wondering what this is because it's gotten humongous and I've had to stake it. What is this? And I said, it is a castor bean. So castor bean plant. So many of us grow it as an annual. And unlike many in the Euphorbiaceae family, it doesn't have the milky sap, but the seeds, and I told my friend this, are very toxic. And the toxin in the seeds is called ricin, which is one of the deadliest natural poisons. 4 seeds can kill an adult. So that kind of shook him up. And of course, then he worried about all their dogs. But it does have seeds. They are highly poisonous. They have ricin in them. And the toxin, ironically, is not found in castor oil, because it must be through the processing, but there is no worry about castor oil. Now this family, the carrot and parsley family, the Apiaceae family, hides some very notorious criminals among its otherwise very healthy and beautiful members. So on the left, we have some phototoxic plants, and you'll recognize all of these plants. They require a little bit of caution. Many of the Apiaceae families are phototoxic, and that means that skin contact in combination with sun exposure can cause a rash. And bishop's weed, if any of you have that in your garden, is so phototoxic that exposure to the seeds could permanently darken your skin. On the right, we have some dangerous wild plants. Water hemlock, poison hemlock, giant hogweed, and cow parsnip contain neurotoxins and skin irritants, and they very closely resemble their edible cousins. And in fact, tragic mistakes have been made by hikers and cooks because they look a lot like edible plants. So here's poison hemlock. It's in the carrot family. It's an invasive plant that is native to Europe and actually was brought over in the 1800s as an ornamental plant, but it's highly toxic. And in fact, it's fatal to humans and animals. All parts of the plant are highly poisonous. The leaves, as you can see, are triangular and lacy and fern-like and pretty. And then on the right, you can see the stems are hollow, with that have the purple spots and blotches. And then the flowers look very similar. You probably see Queen Anne's lace out in ditches and along the roads. It looks a lot like Queen Anne's lace. It has that umbel of white flowers. And an elderberry looks like it, angelica, meadow rue, cow parsnip, water hemlock, Queen Anne's lace, they all look very, very similar. But this needs full sun to flourish, so you will never find it in a shady spot. It's often found near railways, rivers, ditches, field edges, farms, bike paths. And as an interesting note, the Greek philosopher Socrates died of poison hemlock. Water hemlock, here are all the counties you'll find water hemlock. It's also known as poison hemlock. So it's virtually found in almost every county in Minnesota. It's one of the most violently poisonous species in the United States. So the tuber-like fleshy roots, as you can see in the middle, resemble small sweet potatoes. They smell like parsnips, and they're deadly, deadly poisonous. The roots and the rootstocks are the most lethal parts, but all parts of the plant contain toxins, especially when the plants are young. And children and adults have eaten those fleshy roots, mistaking them for artichokes or parsnips or other roots with very fatal results. So a piece of root the size of a walnut can kill a cow. That's how little it takes. So, and the clusters of those fleshy finger-like roots are shallowly embedded in soil, so they're very easy to pull up. Here's water hemlock in the shallows of Lake Superior. And in fact, I gave this presentation last year at the Brainerd Public Library, and a friend of mine was going to the presentation, and so she went out with gloves on, of course, and picked water hemlock and put it in a vase to bring to the presentation to show everybody. She went over to her cabin, and right on the lake was growing water hemlock, or right on the shore. So water hemlock is in the shallows of water, and here it is in the shallows of Lake Superior. And in the right, you'll see that it can be in wet meadows. You can find them in marshes, wet streams, lake borders. If you go camping, you want to check very carefully at campsites. There are 4 varieties in North America, and 3 of them are found in Minnesota. And as you saw in the previous slide, the stem is hollow between the joints, or maybe it was a few slides before. It too has those hollow stems. And children have used those hollow stems to make whistles, and then they're poisoned when they place them in their mouths. So symptoms of poisoning appear 1 to several hours after eating the root. If you were with somebody that accidentally ate this, you would want to induce vomiting right away and call for help, call medical help, because death can occur in 15 minutes, anywhere from 15 minutes to 8 hours if a lethal dose has been taken. So hopefully I haven't scared you too much. I mean, it's probably not likely that you're going to run into it, but you can, because it looks so similar to edible plants. Nicotiana is another evil member of the nightshade or the Solanaceae family, and it contains an alkaloid called nicotine. And ingesting a leaf is much more harmful than smoking a cigarette, because a good deal of the nicotine in cigarettes is destroyed as cigarette is burned. But it does have a powerful neurotoxin used as an ingredient in insecticides. And prolonged skin contact can be very dangerous. It causes green tobacco sickness. And this occurs in field workers who walk through fields of wet tobacco plants in the summer. So green tobacco sickness is a type of nicotine poisoning that occurs when workers handle tobacco plants. So, tobacco takes 5 million lives a year, making it one of the world's most deadly and powerful of all the wicked plants. And I actually cut the presentation down quite a bit. But at the end, I thought it'd be kind of fun if any of us get to travel again. Hopefully we will. There are some really interesting poison gardens that you could visit. The Alnwick Poison Garden in England is one of the most beautiful attractions in England. It has gorgeous gardens, but it also is the best place in the world to see wicked plants. And the Alnwick Castle was in the first 2 Harry Potter movies. There's a poison garden at the Blarney Castle Gardens in Ireland, and when I was there, the gardens hadn't been put in yet. They're very new, but it also contains a collection of poisonous plants from all over the world. And then Jardin Botanique de Montréal is it was created in 1940, their poisonous plant garden, and they have samples of poisonous plants along with information on the effects in various doses, and in fact they even have poison ivy in their collection. So just a fun little tidbit about traveling and seeing poison gardens. Are there any questions? Did I make it in my time limit?
Oh, plenty of time.
Okay.
We never shut anybody off. So I mean, if we go a little long, we go a little long. But that was
Does anybody have any questions?
all right. I'm waiting to see if we have any chats. We did have the one question about the poinsettias. I'm not. Well, the only thing I can say is, sure, the yews are poisonous to everybody except for the deer. I don't understand that.
The yew is very toxic to humans, to many animals, but not deer.
I know.
Deer eat yew foliage freely. For those of us, we have yew trees around our church, and I noticed that the deer just devour them. And for some reason, it does not affect deer, but it does highly affect humans. It's very, very toxic.
Well, I think it's.
I have a question.
Oh, there's Marty.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't rhubarb that we normally eat have oxalic acid?
Good question. In fact, I had that slide in and I ended up taking some food slides out. Yes, rhubarb leaves are poisonous. They have oxalic acid in them. And one important thing to remember with rhubarb is that sometimes in the spring, we can get a late frost. And if you've ever had your rhubarb leaves wilt and become limp and fall over because they got frost nipped, do not eat the stalk. The oxalic acid will move, or could move, and most likely will move from the leaves into the stalk or the petiole, which is the part we eat, and that oxalic acid would be in there, and you do not want to eat that. So that is a very good question. You have to be very careful that if rhubarb freezes, yank out the frozen part and new rhubarb will come in its place and it'll be fine. And it is actually safe to put rhubarb leaves in your compost pile, because I get asked that question a lot.
We do have a couple of questions. We do have one other question from iPad 109. They want to know what they can feed to the deer and rabbits, which will take them out permanently. I think that's the politically correct way of saying, how do I kill them?
I wish I knew, other than a gun. Like I said, they ate my monkshood, my aconitum, which is such a highly, highly toxic plant. and I didn't find any dead deer in my woods, unfortunately. So I don't know, the deer, I get asked, as a master gardener, I get asked about deer a lot, and now they seem to be starting, now I'm getting reports of people saying they're eating their impatiens and their hostas, and it's, a lot of it is because the fawns are active now, and we spray our plants with deer repellent, and and fawns apparently don't have a sense of smell or taste, and so they're out there eating our plants that we're spraying, thinking that we're protecting them. So unfortunately, I don't know of anything other than a gun that would kill deer.
We have another question from Marla. What about lilies? Are you talking about regular lilies or water lilies, Marla? Uh, there have been articles lately, apparently lilies are poisonous to animals. I don't know. Marla, are you
There've
talking
been
about, go ahead.
I
uh,
wish
regular
they
lilies.
were.
There have been some articles in the newspaper, and I've seen it on TV about the beautiful garden lilies being poisonous, especially to cats and somewhat to dogs as well.
I don't know about cats and dogs, but I can tell you that the woodchucks and the deer and the rabbits eat mine freely. I'm a lily collector. I'm also a speaker for the Lily Society. And interestingly, it's because my son and I are lily collectors that I got interested in poisonous plants, because the rabbits, he lives in Minneapolis. He and his wife live in Minneapolis, and he got so frustrated with all of his lilies being eaten by the rabbits that he decided to put in a poison garden instead, and put all poisonous plants so that the rabbits wouldn't eat his plants. So he put in monkshood and delphinium, and I don't know about cats or dogs, but other critters eat them voraciously and frustratingly. So I don't know about cats and dogs, but many other ones are eating them.
All right. Do we have any other questions from anybody?
Any other general gardening questions while I'm here?
Star says she plants castor beans every year and know about the beans on the plant, but are the beans on the plant, are they okay?
No, they're not.
Okay.
The beans on the plant are the seeds, and they have ricin in them, a poison. So they are not safe at all. You would not want, a child to accidentally grab a couple seeds and eat them.
Because isn't castor beans, isn't that what they make ricin poison out of, that they've been sending to people to try and get them to go away permanently?
That could be.
Okay. All right.
I have a general question.
Uh-huh.
And you froze, Marla.
Yeah.
Marla.
I can see you, Marla.
You can ask it. You can move, Marla. She's frozen.
We'll give her a minute and see if she unfreezes.
All right. You can do it, Marla. We know you can. Come on, you can unfreeze yourself. Poor Marla. She's been having this issue, she told me, about a week or two. So here she comes. Maybe. No? Oh, and we lost Marla.
Oh, yep,
she probably got kicked. Yep, she probably got kicked out.
And I'm back.
And she's back. Here she is.
Marla, do you have a question?
Yes, about the Japanese beetles. I found some on my roses. Is this a good time to be spraying the lawn to get rid of the beetles for next year?
You know what, Marla? We do not have Japanese beetles up here.
I'll share some.
Yeah, I can send you some my way.
Luckily, up here in the Brainerd Lakes area, we do not have Japanese beetles. So I'm not that familiar with them, because I I try to pay the most attention to things that affect our county up here and the northern climate. I did just read something from the university about it. I don't know. I personally do not use any pesticides. I do get the rose chafers, which I think are similar in problems to the Japanese beetle, and I go around and handpick as many as I can and throw them in a bucket of soapy water. But I don't know what insecticide to use on them because luckily we do not have them up here.
The fish, the koi really like eating them, by the way.
Oh,
I know we've sprayed in the past. There's something to spray the lawn with to kill the larvae, so we don't get the ones for next year. And I can't remember what time of year to do that.
It's called milky spore.
Or nematodes.
I wonder, there's mosquito bits, which you put in, which can kill larvae. I wonder if that would do it. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with them because luckily we don't have the problem.
You're lucky. I'm glad for you.
Thank you. I'm glad too, because I
love raspberries and roses. That's my problem.
my roses had rose chafers, and then and my peonies also got rose chafers this year.
Okay,
last year was even worse.
We do have another question from one of our members, Ken Ellis. He wants to know a bit about Angelica.
Well, Angelica is in the parsley family and carrot family, the Apiaceae family. And, it's a look-alike to the hemlocks. And does he want to know if it's poisonous?
Yes.
Yes.
How about the effect on the bees? Let's say we have this in a garden and these bees are making honey. Does that have any effect on the product because they're magnets for bees?
The only poisoning from that would just depend on if there is poison in the pollen and the nectar, and I don't think there is. So the only plants that you really have to be worried about if you're a beekeeper is the rhododendron and azalea. You would not want to have beehives around rhododendrons, which azaleas are a rhododendron, because of granotoxin that is in the nectar and in the pollen. So that would be the only plant to really worry about with bees.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had another question or statement. Somebody thought that all parts of Angelica were edible. Would that be a true statement or no?
I don't know. I do not know that much about Angelica. I personally wouldn't eat any plant that I couldn't positively identify and positively say it's not poisonous. And it's interesting because even adults will be out hiking and out on day walks and see berries and pop one in their mouth and try it. And I mean, it's dangerous if you can't positively identify a plant and you don't positively know whether it's poisonous or not. And I'm really not that familiar with Angelica. I just know that it looks a lot like poison hemlock, which is highly toxic, fatal.
Alrighty then. Okay, I am going to stop.
But I'm going to look it up now.
Okay.
Any